Milestones are markers about what we want to achieve and when we want to achieve it, built on trust. Yeah, let's sink in that latter part. It's built on trust. So, the last couple of days, we've been talking about self talk, mindsets, motivation, and today is going to be about milestones. But before I go on, you know the routine by now. I need to switch to Instagram, hit go live. It's thinking about it. And there we go. Go back to the studio so you can see me again. And here we go. Now, the thing when it comes to milestones, the first thing I always think about is projects. And one of the things that I learned when creating a timeline for projects is do it, no, make sure that the time that you use is twice as long. So I think that maybe most people would say time and a half. So one time and a half, but you could also say do twice as long because there's always something that comes in between. Well, by now you probably have noticed that whenever I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it at this hour, it always changes. So earlier today, I said to a friend, you know what, I'm not even going to post when I'm going to go live because I don't know what's going to happen. And that's one of those things which is so true when it comes to milestones. So we started out with this part. Yeah, you probably remember. And then it went to this part, which is today. Now, I don't know if you've noticed it, but something is weird on the top and on the bottom. And that means that something fell off. That's not what we want. And when I was thinking about it, I came up with this part. And in the middle, instead of trust, it said road is trust. So we have the elements. What do we at least want to get in there? Improvisations. What if we cannot achieve it? And we have the markers here, which define the milestones basically. So the question is the marker timeline or is the marker something specific? Coming from the IT, I had to do a lot with projects and when things had to be done. Well, if you remember, I put the word trust in there. So the road is built on trust. And unfortunately, trust is something that wasn't talked about. Of course, there are contracts and there are agreements. So, of course, that means that we trust one another, or better said, that the contract makes sure that we trust one another. So there are penalties like what if you don't reach it in time? What if you don't achieve it in time? But it's also about, but what do people actually promise? Now, do you remember that we talked about self-talk? Oh, this is interesting. I thought that I showed you where the word self-talk was in there. Well, doesn't really matter. I actually have got it here. But we in the previous days, we talked about self-talk. And the self-talk is about what do we tell ourselves. Now, when we are looking at milestones, that same question pops up again. What do we tell ourselves? So I was talking about trust between two parties. So basically you, what you do, what you act on, what you promise yourself that you're going to do. And then there's the mind that is listening, actively observing what you're doing. Now, the mind knows that I'm barely ever on time. I'll honestly say, if you want someone who's spot on, don't work with me. If you want someone who does always communicate when I'm later, absolutely do work with me. I'm reliable in that aspect, that I always communicate when I will be late. Exception here being on Instagram, of course. But when it's about between two people, I always tell them, okay, this is the moment that now I'm leaving, so this is the time I'm going to arrive. So it's not that I'm not that late, but it has happened before. And, there are always things that can happen all of a sudden. So if you have followed me the last couple of days, maybe even the last couple of weeks on Instagram, then you know that I've been struggling with sleep. I'm trying to find a new sleep pattern. And that means that I don't necessarily work all night, but that I know that there are chances that I will fall asleep prior to midnight, which means that I usually sleep on till early morning, which I did today as well. I did set an alarm clock, and when it was ringing, I was like, well, you know what? No. So I think I set it for an hour later and didn't happen either. I don't think I even heard it. And I also said something else, remember yesterday? And when waking up, that was the one thing that kept going through my mind. I said, if I skip this and I'm going to postpone it, then what am I telling myself? I'm not worth it. What I say to you, I'm not dependable. So I was like, okay, it's late. Never mind. There was a reason I didn't post a timeline. So now I'm going to post when I'm going to go live. Of course, there were some delays. And yeah, well, here I am. Later than normal. Absolutely not the time that I wanted to go live. But I'm here anyway. And I know that a lot of people watch this back later on. And I think it's important that by the time they wake up, that this is out there. That they say, good. Yeah, she said 3 days in a row, and here it is. So trust is probably one of the most important things when it comes to milestones. And of course, the road. How are we going to achieve it? But the trust, the self-talk, what do we promise others? What do we promise ourselves? That's at the core. And I don't think that's emphasized often enough. It should be, but I don't think it is. And talking about that part, I've seen many projects where things were promised. Yeah, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And then I would say to the people on the receiving end, okay, please note, because I would be the intermediary between both parties. I would be the service level manager. This is what I promise you. But you have such different systems that if you want to generalize it all, because that's what we're talking about, that's not going to work. So you have to ask them, how about this, that, and the other? So you want to talk about the exceptions, which are not common. What are they going to do about the exceptions? And, well, then of course they would say, well, trust us, it will work. Well, trust me, it won't. I know when it won't, because some things are not doable. That's why people make customized systems. That's the way it works. And we can try and make it a one size fits all. But the question, of course, is that realistic? So I'm writing it down for myself so I know later on what I was talking about, which is because I do have a lot of stuff written down. You can see it on here. But I don't, sometimes when I'm talking, I just come up with things. And yesterday I wrote down a number of bullets. And today, today I was like, no, I want to focus on the framework and what does each element entail. So it was the other way around compared to yesterday. Today I was in a situation, well, actually the last couple of days. Um, I've been part of this amazing group, this amazing Pokemon group. Got to learn a lot of beautiful people. And in the last 3 months, I also learned a lot about how complicated Pokemon is. So before you're like, oh my God, she's talking about Pokemon again, just hear me out. When I woke up today, I found out that they kicked me out of the group. Now here's the thing. It didn't sit well with me for a while now, and especially the last couple of days, which had to do with the old timers versus the newbies. And of course, the old timers who have been doing raiding for years, oh, yeah, they know how it works. They don't even have to think about it. They don't need the rules because they know what they are. It's embedded in their system. But then you have the newbies, and they're like, okay, what can I expect? What do you want me to do? And often I'm the one who is there for the underdog, right? For the one who isn't seen, heard, understood. So when they come with questions, I want them to feel seen, heard, and understood. And I would explain the rules or I would repost the rules. And of course, that would rub the ones who were doing this for years and who were actually essentially in charge of those rules. And of course, it was said, yeah, I explained them when they come in. And I was like, well, something is not going the way it should because they don't understand. Now, from my line of work, I know how difficult communication is. I also know how difficult interpretation is. Especially when you're dealing with some form of autism, then you can take things really literally, which means that if someone says to you, do something in a certain way, there's no deviating from it. It's literally precisely how it was described. And that's the whole thing. It probably wasn't described. It was like one word or 2 words or 3 words. But what if it doesn't work? So to give you an example, one of the things when we are rating, so Pokemon says, okay, here you go. You want to raid. Well, we can walk over to the virtual Pokestop, or we are on the other side of the world, and or we are, just a little bit outside of the range of the Pokestop, and then we need to do it remotely. Remotely usually costs money. I actually don't know when it didn't cost money. So yeah, doing it remotely costs money. So when you're locally, it's for free. When you're not, it costs money. So we invite people. When we are hosting, we invite people and we say, okay, come on over. That means that there needs to be, yes, trust about what we are going to do. There are rules, there are guidelines. So what the host needs to do is to make sure that there are enough people to actually require what needs to be done. So when we talk about markers, we are talking about, okay, so basically the milestone is we won't rate until we know there are enough people with the right counters. Yeah, that's another. And if we don't, then we need to improvise and see what's happening. So we have the elements. The elements are enough people, preferably prepared the right way. When we talk about counters, it's okay, which Pokemons do we use, which elements are in the Pokemons. But again, when we are not sure, then we need to improvise. So the whole purpose of this group was that we wouldn't have to go outside of the group to ask people. because outside of the group, when you go to other groups, people generally just jump. So they board ship when things don't go well. That's very frustrating, and that's why you want a group that's reliable. Again, trust. And one of the things that I talked about from the get-go was, but what if one of those elements isn't right up to par? So what if the quality is not good enough? So for instance, when we talk about elements, we are talking about the amount of people, which depends on the number of stars, and also the difficulty of the Pokemon. So you can have one version of the Pokemon, say the male one. You can have the other version, say the female one. The male one is easy and the female one is like, why don't I succeed? So the male one easily done with 6 or less, and then comes the female one, and sometimes 8 is even like, really? So we had this discussion. No, it should be done with 5. And I was like, yeah, so why don't we? Because I did it with 5. Then I learned, oh, but you do need a certain level. Oh, okay, hang on, level. And then someone else added, but you also need to write counters. So you need the group of Pokemons that you are working with need to be, they need certain elements in there in order to be what you need. That didn't work out quite often. So I started to learn to just do those things, which was good. But now, here you are new. And there you go. And you were like, oh, that's cool. So they say minimum 5. Yeah, sure, there are 5. Then I would come up and I would say, yeah, but you are level. And if that was below the level, I would say, so you're half a person. And then people would say, what's that? What's half a person? What I wanted to say was, listen, it's not a full person. You can't count on it as a full member rating at that moment. And of course, there were the counters. And I don't know how many people actually did the counters, but I can tell you for the new ones, counters, what's that? You know? So do you remember when I said I worked for a company and at some point they would merge the IT from one company into the other one? So they would centralize it. I said generalize, but it's actually centralized. But what they do is they use general components. And when they have built something, so customized versus one size fits all, well, there we go. So basically, the whole rating, especially for the hard ones, also had to do with customization. Yeah, it could be one size fits all if everything is high quality. So you're the right level, you know everything that you're doing. So basically, the experts are high quality. But then we get again to, yeah, but how about the newbies? And that makes it really hard. And one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years is when it comes to cost reduction, fortunately, we don't have to deal with cost reduction in Pokemon. The first thing that goes down is quality. And, well, I think that people deserve to know what they're in for. So when you are hosting a raid, people pay money. And of course, they don't want to see the raid get lost because, out of time, and they lose the money and they don't get anything in return. So I would be the one at first to say, okay, if you don't make it and you feel like you need to jump, then please do it 20 seconds prior to the timer being at 0. Why? Because when you go out prematurely, then it won't cost you the pass. Old timer said, yeah, but we don't jump. Now here's the newbies, and let's see what you do when you have newbies with autism. Oh, we don't jump. So that's what I hear. We don't jump. So then all of a sudden they're faced with something, and during the game they figure out it's not working. And they're like, oh, abort ship. So then you need to jump. Well, that's usually something that's okay. Others say, no, we go until the end. But there's there's a downside to that one too. The downside is that when you do it, you actually have to get a lot of revives because all those Pokemons faint when they need to keep on fighting. So you need a huge army instead of a small army. And counters are only 6, so you need way more counters than just that part. Now, the good news is if you have enough potions, you can keep reviving them. And on one phone, so one account I do, on the new account I don't. So that's a bit of a problem. And I'm not the only one who doesn't have enough potions to revive all those Pokemons. We can buy them, and then again, there it is, the element of money. So we all want the same thing. We don't want people to lose money. We do want them to be trustworthy, and that means that they need to know how many people are in there. So that's why I would come up with things like, okay, people, I'm level half because I'm below level 40. No, not okay. Okay, you need to have the right counters. Then you can do it all, even with the wrong level. Okay. And then, of course, there's the way the people actually tap on the screen. And it's kind of funny because I went to a group locally, and what happened, I literally saw them doing. And I was like, what? Because I do. That's a big difference, right? Well, there were more things to consider, but the whole jumping, the explaining a little bit about, hey, this is what works, this is what not works, was something that didn't sit well with them. Okay, so I removed the half. I removed the 20 seconds because they didn't agree with the 20 seconds. And, well, then I don't know why. Suddenly we came up with the names and the alter accounts, and I was like, so people had trouble actually finding the right names because something had changed. I think it was on the side of Apple, I'm not sure, or it was on the side of Messenger on Facebook. And people didn't know how to create lists. So I started creating lists, and I was really good at it. So I would tell people, okay, when you make lists, make sure that the right things are in there. So you don't want points in there, no dots. You want commas and spaces. And you want to make sure that you spell the name accurate. We're still talking here about the right element. We're still talking about trust. So people trust that when they put their names in there, that you actually use that same name to so they can actually join, because there's no fun when people start doing a game together and you're left out. So I would keep an eye on things, and then all of a sudden things went haywire this weekend. They had this, what they call the road to Sino, I don't know how to pronounce it. But as a result, it was pretty crowded, and everybody wanted to join because everyone wanted that specific Pokemon. And I noticed that people would not get a spot on the team because at some point it would be maxed out. And there would be disappointment. So I said, okay, I'll keep an eye on those who are left out, and the next round they go in. No, we start anew with the list. And I was like, but I'm here for those who aren't heard and seen. So another, like, they didn't like my adjustments, like I said. Okay. But what's there to say about it? It's disappointing when people say we don't care about the ones who get left out. I don't agree with that part. Then they came up with something new, which actually did make sense, which was also based on making things easier. So a lot of us have alternate accounts because that way you can do more within Pokemon. And when we are hosting with just a small amount of people, that's actually kind of nice because then we have an extra player in the game. So one person is basically two players. But when it's busy, then of course, everyone with an alternate account takes up two spaces instead of one. So they say, well, that's not fair. We need to go back to one. So you can list one name, and basically you don't have to use that one name because we know what the name is. So basically all you do is post an emoji. Well, from the get-go, I had two accounts. I talked about what do I name them so people don't get confused. I adjusted the name so people wouldn't get confused. People would still get confused, but at least two names on the list. And that's where things went haywire recently because people said, no, there needs to be one. And I was like, why do there need to be one? What's this? Yeah, of course, when it's crowded, I'll do it. But when it's not, no, doesn't make sense. Because they said at the end of things, you can adjust the list with the right names. And I was like, oh, this is prone for error. So we were from everyone, one person makes the list, to when we didn't know the nicknames, please add your list at the end of the name, at the end, add your name at the end of the list, to back to one person making it. And of course, it was never one person, so everyone would do it through one another, and then names would get lost. You get the picture. And again, this is about trust. So when you put an emoji out there, you trust that you are included. So when I would look at it, I would say, okay, we're full. Sorry, can't join anymore. So what I would do is communicate extensively. And there we go. When it comes to quality, when it comes to expectations, what do you do? How do you communicate? Well, here's the thing that was said by the ones who did it for years on end now. They're adults, they need to know. And besides, it's a game. Well, I totally agree, it's a game. But we're still talking about human beings who want to be included. And let's not forget the impact that it has on human beings. So you can say it's just a game. But when people are left out consistently, when they realize, yeah, but this is not working because one moment you say this and the next moment you say the other, that influences people. It doesn't sit well with them and it influences them. So I guess that one person, there were a lot of persons who were so happy with me, but old timers, not so much. And I think I was the first one to speak up about certain things. So basically, I was sort of tweaking the rules. Like, I don't agree with the rules the way they are. And that brings me right back to the beginning again. When I was part of a computer center, and that was the main computer center, and all the other companies which were part of the big corporation needed to make sure that all their hardware and software from the IT would be incorporated in the main computer center. Well, basically that's the responsibility of the main computer center. So the old timers, the experts, and not from the newbies. So the one who gets incorporated. And they usually didn't know. And I seen it gone wrong multiple times. So I would warn them, listen, they cannot do that. That's not going to work. And then, yeah, well, we're going to sign it anyway. And I was like, okay, don't say I didn't warn you. And of course, I was right because you could see it from a mile away, especially when having dealt with more projects. And that's basically what this is about. So now let's take it on a very personal level. So we've talked about the mind. We've talked about self-talk. We've talked about mindsets. Remember? And this is about what do we tell ourselves, because the brain knows, and the brain relies on how you act. So you can say one thing, but if you do the other thing, then the mind is like, you said you would do this, but I cannot trust you based on your words. So you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. Well, there you go. That's a problem. And that's why when it comes to all these things, milestones, called projects, whatever you want to do, we need to be specific. And more importantly, we need to be able to improvise when things do not go the way they are. So the first thing is we want to talk about the elements. So when I said we were talking about braiding, elements would be, okay, you need to have enough players at the right level with the right counters, and we don't jump. Well, that's a rule, but the elements are enough players at the right level with the right counters. Who also know what they're doing. That's also kind of nice. But those three things are at the basis of it all. When I talk about the challenge that I'm doing, just to make a jump to something that you've known, the elements involve 3 days in a row, because I said I'm going to go live 3 days in a row. Normally, I would have this landing page. Well, I told you about it. I still don't have the landing page. But then we go to the other side, the improvisation. So what if we don't have that one? Then I said, okay, people can send me comments, use that word. So there was a backup system for it. It was not the best one, but it worked. Then there are the things that we rely on. So in order to make it work, I go live. I use a platform called StreamYard. So what I need to do is to make sure that there's enough storage on there. So I can actually record and also record locally, because what if something happens and the sound is not good enough, which happened on the second day, on the first day. And I didn't realize it until I was listening to it, and I was like, oh my God, that doesn't sound too good. But fortunately, I had hit record locally, but that takes up space. It basically takes up twice the amount of space. So I need to make sure that before I start anything, I have backup the other stuff so I can take it down. So I guess that the elements for going live for the challenge is have enough storage. What was the other one again? Mind fog, there it is again. Oh, yeah, the landing page. So people know where to go to. Of course, we need to set the date. Which date are we going to do it? So at some point, I said the last weekend of the month. That's when I start doing this. And, well, the last weekend of the month comes early this time around. It's a short month, 28 days. This year, 29 days. And so I'm doing it early. And actually, after I've done the challenge, we still have a few days left from this month, but that's okay. But I said, okay, every Friday, Friday Night Live, every day I'm posting on Instagram, and every last weekend of the month, I'll do the challenge. The one thing I didn't know yet was, but what if it's like the 31st, the 1st and the 2nd? And I will tell you right away, right now, then it's going to be the weekend ahead of time. Why? Because on the 1st and the 2nd, always things are, there are a lot of training, and I don't want to do my live when there's a lot of training. Then again, having said so, I did um, I did have that problem the previous time. So, well, it's still a little bit like, what do we do? It's all about communicating. So, like I said, the last weekend of the month, that can vary depending on what you're doing. And well, I had to deal with certain things conflicting, and I was like, okay, so when am I going to do this? Am I going to do this in the break? Am I going to do it afterwards? How do I go around this training? And those are things to consider. So that's why we need some flexibility, improvisation. Other elements for going live, like I said, StreamYard it sends it all to YouTube. Well, that's a one-time thing. Once you've made sure that YouTube is connected to StreamYard, then you're good to go. Then there's Facebook. So every now and then it says you need to sign in again because, well, we can only do it for a certain amount of days, but that's rather easy too. And then, of course, they have this new element, which is called Instagram. And Instagram is so unreliable because it's new. Remember, old timers, experts, newbies. Newbies are the ones who don't know it all, but where it's not trustworthy. So on one hand, I'm so happy with Instagram. On the other hand, it causes me, well, I'm not going to say headaches, but it does cause me a lot of delays. And today, for instance, just like yesterday, what did I need to do? I needed to restart the whole thing because my microphone didn't work. Restarting meant that I needed a new code from Instagram, so I needed to go back, put the new code in there. Fingers crossed that the microphone was working. Of course, the first time it doesn't, so you need to close it, open it back up, and then, phew, it did work. Good. I never know. So you've seen me go live without Instagram. You've seen me go live with Instagram and the microphone just muting. And you've seen me go live with Instagram and the sound was like, I'm pretty sure that it had to do with interference of other devices. But, that's why I was so happy when StreamYard said, we are going to do things locally. Yes, it made all the difference. So all these elements require trust. Trust that it's the right quality. Trust that I can be heard. And of course, trust that I can do it on time and that there is not a ton of delays because the printer isn't working again. Well, by now I know. So I'm starting to become an expert at what's going on when it comes to my challenges using the elements I use. Well, that's a printer that's unreliable. Once it starts working, then usually I can go on. Other times it gives me not headaches, but yeah, it does cost energy. So that's the thing. So when I was like today, I first of all said, I'm not going to post when I'm going to do it because I never know when I'm going to do it. And I'd rather post it last minute than post it and then it's not the right time. It just didn't seem to make sense. And that's what I did. And then, yeah, I did run into some stuff, including the printer, including Instagram. And so I started later than I wanted to. And then, of course, there was this thing. So I started out with this thing first. And I was like, I'm missing something on the top and the bottom. But there was also different words. And at some point I realized, yeah, but this is not just about trust. It is about road leading to the milestones. And the road is based on trust. And I was like, okay, no, then we need to do it over again. Of course, the printer still doesn't want to work straight away. So at some point I had 3 copies of the same thing, which is okay. It's that's what improvisation is about. Now let's go to the markers, the milestones. So in case of a raid, you have to do certain things within a certain timeline. And when you're too late or you don't have enough people, then you're done. You either don't get in or you do get in, but when something happens, when there's a glitch, you get thrown out and you cannot get back in again. And again, that means that you've lost the pass. That means money. Now, apparently, you can tell this to the company and then they do something about it. I haven't done so. Maybe I should. But, that's the way it works, basically. So getting back to the challenges and what we talk to and what we tell ourselves, we need to define what we consider milestones. So milestones can be 100 days of posting something every day on Instagram. It could also be the number of people watching, for instance, on YouTube. 1,000 people have viewed my videos. It could also be about one specific thing that you've accomplished. So we've accomplished an entire raid with everyone, and everyone has caught the Pokemon that they wanted to. Because the end game is not only to win, but when we've won, we also still need to catch the Pokemon and we don't want it to run. And one of the perks from the group is someone had a hack. She explained it and I was like, oh my God, it's worked so much better. So my rate of Pokemon's running that I can't catch has gone down, that I don't catch has gone down dramatically. I almost catch them straight away. But every now and then they still run. But again, self-talk. What do we tell ourselves? And then it comes to what do we prioritize? So when we talk about the elements and we talk about the markers, so the elements and the markers, then it's about what at least do we expect from that one thing that we promise ourselves. So what do I expect from myself when hosting a challenge? Well, I expect that there's actually recording. I expect that people know when I'm going to go live. I cannot expect people to join me because you never know when people have time. And then, of course, there are other circumstances. What I've learned is not to postpone things because for some reason, when I do, my voice gives in other things. So it's important for me to say, I'm going to do this now and not postpone. Other elements are handouts. So in previous challenges, I didn't use handouts. It's something I've started doing recently. Thanks to Brendan Burchard. He said, well, actually everyone should have a framework. And that's one of the reasons that I actually went to Austin last October, because I was like, okay, how does it work? Last September, that framework. It's actually why I signed up to one of his coaching programs, because I want to know about the framework. Well, he's been talking about it on and off. And at some point he said, well, whenever you teach, have a framework. And I was like, oh, yeah, makes sense. So I'm thinking about which elements do I want in there. So this framework here is already an adjustment from the framework over there, but it's very different from this one over here, which is the one I started out with. Continuing on. Sometimes, like I said, things don't work out, so then we need to improvise. Like when I do not have that landing page, okay, leave a comment. We need to improvise. I fell asleep again. When it comes to a certain kind of quality, when I'm really sleepy, I'm slow. My brain doesn't work very well. So it was like, yeah, I can drag myself to there. And no, it doesn't have to be perfect, but how sleepy do I want to be? And I can tell you, I've done several recordings where I was somewhat sleepy because I'm posting every day on Instagram. And it's not my favorite thing to do. So usually I do wake up at some point, but I've also had very short videos because of that same reason. So markers, what do we want to get out of it? So is it the number of people? Is it a certain number of days? Because we want to be specific. And well, what I want is to create a video, a live, where people are watching it and it makes sense. So people are like, yeah, we understand that. And they see the framework and they know if they register, they can get the framework too. They can get their PDF. And if they're very happy with the training, they subscribe, they buy the training, and they can watch it over and over and over again. And if you don't want to buy it, then it's there for a week and then it's taken down. And, that's, I don't even have to say when I take it down because it's my product. But it's nice when people know, because then you're reliable. Remember? Trust. So when I talked about the computer centers, remember that part? So when I said I want to do my live, then I want to make sure that people can understand what I'm talking about and they actually can relate to it themselves. That's the markers for my challenge. So it needs to bring something to the table, not like the same thing all over and over and over again, but just, if it's that little one thing that they get out of it. When we talk about the computer centers, they trusted that when they would get all that stuff over there, which they would pay money for, of course, that they would get the same service as when they did it themselves. But they can't, because customized versus one size fits all. And that was a problem. And that's when we get back to the whole element of trust. Now we get back to our brain and our mind and our mindset. So when we say we'll make it work somehow, okay, I can work with that promise, but that means that you need to be able to improvise. But still, you need to know what is the one thing, the standard that I want to get out there. So for me, the minimum is I end up with 3 videos. Now, well, actually, the minimum would probably be I've had 3 broadcasts, 3 days in a row, 3-day challenge, so 3 days. We could go from 3 videos to 3 days in a row to we do 3 broadcasts and I'll see whenever. Do you see what's happening right here? So I'm lowering the standards nonstop. And if I were to do so, which I didn't, by the way, then I would tell my brain something. It's okay to postpone. It's okay to do the work and not have any results. Well, the results would be one time instead of being able to use it over and over and over again. As for the element of signing in, signing up, that's something that always can be adjusted after the fact. So I improvised for during the event, and then there's something that I can do after the event. So sort of like a backup plan. And there's always things that need to be done afterwards. But that does mean that we need certain elements to function. I need the sound quality to be good, because I can maybe re-record what this sounds, but not when it's like an hour. That's way too long. But I can work with it when it's done locally. So maybe it looks a little bit different, but that's okay. It's the same story, it's the same video, just better sound quality, which is what we want. So now my brain knows, yeah, she's doing the challenges every last weekend of the month, my brain also knows that even though I had to sleep for a while because I was very tired, that I will do it anyway. So I'm consistent, just like I'm consistent with posting on Instagram every day. So my brain knows it's important. Well, the last couple of days I talked about setting the intention. So the intention is I'm going to do the 3-day challenge, and I'm going to do it last weekend of the month. And I do it 3 days in a row, and my mind knows she's doing it. We know she does. And whenever doubt creeps in, and doubt eats trust, then it's about me saying, no, I said I was going to do 3 days in a row. Well, then I'm late. Well, doesn't really matter. A lot of people watch afterwards anyway. So here I am, and I'm doing it. And the marker in this case is, the first milestone is it needs to be ready the last weekend of the month. So that needs to be communicated. So last weekend of the month. And the second marker is actually that, it's done. So afterwards we have 3 days, 3 videos. And if we want to have it with not perfect, but with the amount of quality that I want nowadays, then that includes PDFs and some other things that people can reread. Of course, different level of quality, all new, and preferably I would have a team who could help me with it, but I still haven't found the right people just yet. So for now, I'm doing it myself, not because I want it to be perfect. Well, that's not entirely true. At least I know I'm reliable, and I know what I want the outcome to be. And trust is a very difficult thing when you want someone else to go do it. But I know that they do exist. Other people do have amazing teams. So I know that if I'm patient enough, I will get my own team too, who will know what to do. The milestones is not just about this one challenge. At the end of the year, we will have 12 challenges, which are related to 12 topics, which are related to the topics Brandenburg chart uses, because I am a CHPC, I'm a certified high performance coach. So I basically can coach it the same way he has described it, of course, with my own personal elements, but holding on to those 12 topics. Or I can call it my own, and then I call it my own. But I cannot do it entirely my own, not looking even like the other stuff, and I call myself CHPC. And then he's going to say, hey. And when I do use it, I need to use the name of how he called it. But I talked to my coaches about it, and I said, well, I do want something, because I'm still figuring out how I'm going to do this. So the perfect way would be to actually do it along the lines that he set out. So certain aspects are represented in the module. And then on top of it, I also add my own spin on things. But in order to do so, I was like, well, let's start. And it was coincidental that I started with clarity, which was always related to my trip to Chicago. If you want to know why, then you really need to see the other videos. Then in December, because it was the darkest month, it seemed to make sense that it was energy. And then I was like, okay, so what's the next one? Where are we going to be? And I realized it had to do everything with courage. And hey, that was the next element. And then for this month, I was like, okay, what's on the list? Productivity. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Well, I managed. We're almost done with the month. And I do think I also managed to make it fun. So I always want to do it in such a way that people can relate it to their own lives. So I tend to take examples of my life to make it more understandable. There's nothing more annoying than dry theory where people cannot relate to. So that's why I give at least one, but preferably multiple examples so people get an idea how it works. Like I said, if everyone's brain works a bit differently, so what they can uh, understand might vary per example, and maybe someone has understood them all and they're like, yeah, we know, but now go on, move on. But it's about including all people. So I basically describe what I'm going to talk about, and then all else is up to you. Are you going to watch it or not? And what are you going to do when you're watching it? Are you taking notes or not? And then, of course, afterwards, what are you going to do? Are you going to join the group coaching? Are you going to join the one-on-one? Do you actually want to watch this again and again and again because you got so much out of it? It's all up to you. What I can do, and then we get back to the elements and to the quality and to the trust and to the markers, is make sure that what I have got in mind, that it's going out there. Does it need to be perfect? No, but it needs to be out there. And I want it done in a way that it works. So if it works with elements which are maybe not that nice and glossy and, okay, that's the way it is, but it still works. And that's what's the most important thing. So after 3 days of talking about mindsets, what do you tell yourself about motivation? When are you going to do it? What's your reward going to be? And also, reward can be that you've learned a new skill. And then milestones, which are related to, okay, what do you want to accomplish when and how and at what price and which quality are we talking about and what's included, of course. Now we have the whole bunch of things when it comes to productivity, because productivity basically has to do with getting things done. Now, the one thing I didn't mention this time around, I usually do, is do things one step at a time. And that's what I do. With each challenge, I improve. With each challenge, I do a little bit more. The previous challenge did have a landing page. This one didn't. So that was a little bit going backwards. But, I'm doing the frameworks now. I actually changed the framework per session, per day. That's new. So when it comes to the learning curve and what I want to achieve, so productivity, what do I get out there? And how do I do it effectively and efficiently? Well, I think that I'm making improvements every day, time and time again, with every challenge. And that's what being productive is about. It's about not sitting backwards, leaning back and not doing anything and just waiting what happens. It's about taking initiative and being creative. So having said all of this, if you're like, well, Lexi, that was interesting. Yes, I want to see it more often. Then hit me up and leave in the comments, yes, I want to see this more often. Then I know what you mean. I'll check the comments, and otherwise I will make sure that there is a landing page still available. So I will adjust it after the fact. For now, leave a comment. What is that one thing that you love the most about today's training, but also about the last 3 days? Let me know so I can learn from it, which means that other people can learn from it because I can get into it. I'll see you again next Friday, and maybe prior to it.